Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Welcome to season 8 of Gather for Her. I'm Tina O, I'm your moderator, and I'm grateful to be connecting with you all here from Nahuelaquam, also known as Bowen Island, BC, Canada, on the soil originally named as Turtle Island, now known as the continent of North America. I am grateful to rest my head and play and co-create here on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories and land and home to the Squamish people. So glad you're with us. Gather for Her invites you to be part of our co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors. And it's brought to you today by Powerhouse, that's us, and produced by Regen Media, that's Charlene. At Powerhouse, we walk beside leaders to amplify their change work as they walk their path of whole leadership, guided by conscious leadership practices and Indigenous ways of knowing and being. Our impact media producer is Regen Media. That's again Charlene down there in the corner, who invites us to take the power of media into our own hands by supporting stories that heal, regenerate, uplift, and transform. And every 2 weeks, we are here, live here on LinkedIn, followed by a private interactive wisdom circle held on the Leader Path, which is our virtual fire in Powerhouse. But I'll tell you more about that a bit later. I am going to pop in a few times during this recording to introduce you to different things that we have available for leaders like you who are ready to elevate and decolonize their leadership by walking an integrated path of Indigenous ways of knowing and being. Okay, so as this is a live conversation and we are recording, we would love it if you would introduce yourself as a listener or viewer in the chat, say hello to, and let us know where you're connecting from with an acknowledgement of gratitude for the lands in which you rest, play, and grow. And we know that that might, for some of you, that might be a new thing, and that's okay. Reconciliation in action begins with awareness, and it's followed by a practice. And then it's carried forward for future generations with an integrated knowing. And you can be awkward here in Powerhouse. This is come as you are. This is learn as you are. And together we will soften and grow and co-create the world that we're living into together. So let's begin. I'm going to pass over to my sisters in change making and let them introduce themselves. And then we'll introduce our special guest for you today. So who wants to say hello first? Christina, Sharon, then we'll go to Shar. Good morning. Oh, they're just fighting for it. There we go. Christina's on.
All right. Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Benty, and I'm very excited about this conversation today because I know Margie personally. And I'm so excited about this season as well as we dive into whole leadership, because it's something I'm very, very passionate about, is that integrative leadership, that's soul to soul leadership rather than role to role leadership. So you can usually find me in Golden, BC, which is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and the Shuswap peoples, and the home of the Columbia River Métis. In Powerhouse, my role is as a strategic advisor, as well as the curriculum developer for First Steps and the facilitator for First Steps, which is very much about whole leadership. So welcome, everyone. All of you, all your bits and pieces are welcome here in this conversation, and we're thrilled that you're here. I'm going to pass it over to my sister Sharon.
Thanks, Christina, and welcome everyone. I am super excited to be here, a part of this conversation that we hold every 2 weeks with amazing change makers, and I am looking forward to the conversation with Margie today. I am coming to you today from, I actually live in Lanceville, which is in between the Snuneymuxw and Snuneymuxw nations on Vancouver Island. And so I have been here for a couple of years and I love it. I'm a block and a half from the ocean, and I feel very blessed to live, work, and play here. And I look forward to what's going to transpire in the next hour. So pass it on to my sister, Charlene.
Thank you, Sharon. It's my pleasure to welcome you and to host this conversation from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish First Nations here on the beautiful Sunshine Coast. I want to just ground us into the conversation this morning as to why do we gather. And for me, the theme this season about walking the path of whole leadership is actually walking a path from healing to hope to that place of wholeness and the experience of complete health, which for me is coming home. And as we hold each other in conversation and in circle, we hold each other accountable, we lift each other higher, and we learn, heal, and grow together. Unless you're in the active practice of doing that, you risk falling off the path, to be honest with you. So I'm truly grateful to be part of this conversation and excited to see what unfolds today. Margie is a fearless leader, and she's the visionary behind Thought Architects, which is a collaborative organization built on a shared desire to make workplaces great by building up leaders from all walks of life and in creating their own amazing workplaces. She works with her team to gather various perspectives, ideas, and frames of reference to make ideas around leadership tangible and attainable for people. The team puts these learning opportunities together to create experiences for their clients and learners. Over to you, Christina, to round that out, as I trust you will do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shar. Here's what I can say about Margie. We were introduced by a mutual friend. He sent out a message and said, "You have to meet Margie." And so we connected. And our very first walk, it was like a magnet. It was like, fellow geek, I love this woman right away. Margie really is somebody who she walks her talk. She balances the art and science of leadership, and she understands the science, but she's also integrating the science of leadership into the art of leadership. And I have the utmost admiration for her as a person, as a leader, as a change maker. Her and I are often, when we're talking, we're just gasping for air, right? Because we just get so jazzed by the conversation. So every time I have a chance to spend time in her presence, I am absolutely delighted. So, Margie, how about you? Would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. It's kind of intimidating to do that, but I'm kind of embarrassed. But Christina, right back at you. I think one of the most amazing comments you've ever said was, I have these fleeting moments of lucidity. And I'm like, I feel like that's just life. And that's stuck with me. I use that term all the time. I have a fleeting moment of lucidity. But before I say too much, I do want to acknowledge I'm calling in from Calgary, which is the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy here in southern Alberta, with the Siksika, the Kainai, Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda nations, and the Métis Nation of Region 3. And I'm so lucky to actually be right up against where the home is, and I can walk through the forest and the land and the paths, and I can bike through there. Like I'm so lucky to be where I am. And then my other home in Golden, BC, where I've met with Christina. So I consider myself incredibly lucky to live, work, and play on traditional lands. So I'm Margie. I'm a mom to 3 boys. One's a teenager and making me a little crazy, but this is live. He won't see it. Actually, I have 2 teenagers and 1 9-year-old. I have a wonderful husband. I have a great family. Luckily, I've been really fortunate to be able to create a kind of workplace where we do walk the talk. We want to create great workplaces, and we know it's hard work. And we know it's about being vulnerable, and we know it's about being open and having hard conversations and having fun. And so we have created, I think each of us in our group came from some workplace at some point in time in our lives, as we all probably have, that was not very fulfilling, that didn't have that flow, that people didn't get along, that there was the water cooler chat, that there was the cliques, that there was the gossip, there was the power plays. And we really wanted to create something that was the opposite of that, and very purposely came about to do that and teach people very practically how to do that, that it's all about how you lead yourself. It starts with self. So yeah, that's I'm lucky. I'm fortunate. I'm just really fortunate. So I do acknowledge that.
Awesome. Thanks, Margie. Now, we've had the pleasure of chatting. I've had 2 1-hour chats where I just have to say, like, what I really hope happens today is that divergent, that divergent conversation happens, that you realize at the end of it wasn't divergent at all. It was like, because that always happens when I'm in your presence. I feel like you and I share a common understanding of story, and we might just use different language for it. I would love to jump into, I know back at the train, I know that you have a real heart for healthcare, and that you're also going to be a panelist for our fire circle when we talk about healing systems and talking about the healthcare system. And I would love to hear what is up in your world around whole leadership from that place. I'm not putting you on the spot to heal the system, but whole leadership and healthcare would be where I would start.
It's shattered leadership in healthcare right now. There's nothing whole about it. And we had snippets of it before the pandemic. Like the pandemic, there's no doubt that's been hard on any frontline worker. And I have to say, I've been every day, I'm like, thank goodness I didn't stay at the front line because I don't know how I would have coped. I have friends who talk about how they're nurses and they say, you work on the wards and you remember 2 or 3 people who died under your care and that moment, and you never forget their names and you never forget their families. It touches your soul. And now we have 5 people a day dying. And you can't remember everything about them and you can't remember their soul. There's just this one big blur. And so what I think brought that, compassion heals. There's no doubt. There's actually a whole book called Compassionomics. In healthcare, compassion actually heals. And that's a huge piece of leadership at all levels. And it's just, it's not there because people are shattered. So I think it was there before in snippets. You'd see it when you go to the hospital, you get bad care, when avoidable accidents would occur, when people would quit, when people would leave, when sick rates were high. If you have people calling in all the time, they're not happy at work. Your care system is only as good as the care providers in it. And if the care providers in it aren't doing well, the system isn't doing well.
So it comes back to people, the wellness of people.
It does. It does. It's like teachers, if with your kids, if your kid has a great year when they have a great teacher, and you get great care when you have a great care provider. I still remember when I had my first child, and I had 20 hours. It was a typical, 20 hours of labor. You push, nothing happens. Emergency C-section. And I remember sitting there, and you're lying there, your arms are out, and you're exhausted. And I remember the anesthesiologist stroking my hair and saying, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be just fine." I don't remember anything else, but I remember that. And that's compassion and care. And that's what makes your health better. It actually has a way of making your health better because we're neurological beings. And so when our hormones are released, when those positive hormones are released, they actually have a positive impact on our body. When we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're worried, the cortisol, the dopamine, all those things that are negative hormones actually have an impact on other parts of our body. And things like cancers evolve from it. Things like inflammatory disease. They're all connected to how we feel. So it's not that it's in your head, but we are literally we're head and bodies. We're not just heads and we're not just bodies. And so another book I'm totally obsessed with is The Body Says No, and talks all about this, about how there is that mind-body connection. And it's not just, it is actually physiological. It's not just in our head. So I think if we don't actually address people in the health system, it's like a toxin that spreads. So I think we have to be able to create whole leadership back in healthcare. It's not there right now.
You know where that...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Sharon. You know where that takes me is one of the things that I often say is that we can't give to others what we haven't given to ourselves, or what we don't give to ourselves. So I'm curious if that resonates with you in relationship to whole leadership, because that conversation around compassion, how do we give compassion to ourselves so that we can give it to others? Curious where that takes you.
I think that's all of our hard work in life, isn't it? Like understanding, again, here's a Christina-ism that stuck with me. How do I reflect and not absorb? How do I reflect where somebody's at so that they can see and they can grow themselves and be compassionate, but not absorb it myself so it actually infiltrates me? That kind of, that perception, I think that's the hard work of people, of our lives, whether it's relationships, whether it's work, whether it's family, friends. You can feel empathy, you can feel compassion, but you also have to know where your own personal boundaries are. And that I think that's the hard work we all have.
That feeds into my point, the point that I want, my question, and that is, you know, when the pandemic first hit, I mean, it was just, everybody was slammed, and we were not trained for a pandemic. I don't think anybody was in healthcare was trained for a pandemic. And so you can be the most compassionate person in the world, but all of a sudden you're dealing with the trauma that happened. Like how do you remind yourself to be compassionate in a situation where you're just fighting, you're just putting out fires? Like I
don't think you could in the time. I think now's the time for healing. Like you're in full on, you're right, you're in full on emergency mode. That is, and I think also during the height of it, many just found this strength and some teams got really strong through it and they supported each other, but it can only continue for so long. Now I think is the time for healing. And this is where kind of concepts of, so there's like the head and the heart, and then there's also, we can put it into other language that may resonate for healthcare workers, and it's the adaptive versus technical. So there's technical, as you all likely know, there's technical leadership, right? So that's throughout healthcare. That's how to do a hip replacement. That's how to do a central line. That's how to start a central line. It's how to do a tracheotomy. Technical knowledge, technical expertise, you need it. Healthcare is full of it. But it doesn't translate into all these other components. The adaptive leadership is where you have to go from a stance of not knowing. And I was actually thinking about this morning as I was walking my dog. I'm like, I'm kind of shocked at how little I know. Like, and you only figure that out as you go through life. And that so much of what you assume to be real is this social construct that is just around you, and you have no idea what other lives might be. I was talking to actually a friend of ours who lives down the street in Golden, and they used to live in Rossland. And they said it was so weird how when the people in Trail would talk about, because of the mine and all of the toxins and the lead in the ground, the conversations would be like, well, of course you don't let your kids play in the grass. Like, and that was normal. That was a whole normal context. Well, of course you don't. And that's a reality. So we create these realities, and I don't know what each of your realities that you come from in the past are, and what your reality is in the future. We only have this moment. But you can't forget that, I'm a product of A, B, C, D, like all these people behind me and all my life behind me. and I'm part of that fabric moving forward. And I don't know where I'm going with this is that I think that adaptive leadership component you can only really focus on if you know you don't know. And you can get to someplace much richer when you tap on what do other people know, experience, feel, and then use that to weave the best path forward. And yeah.
I'm going to jump in on this and then just reset the room for any new people. I just want to pull that thread through of when you're willing to know that you don't know. And that is a terrifying place for people who are saving lives. And that's their job, is to know stuff so bad things don't happen. And yet what a challenging invitation. I just want to let that sit for a moment while I greet people who are, if you're just finding us here on LinkedIn, this is Gather for Her. We are a co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors, brought to you by Powerhouse and produced by Regen Media. Every 2 weeks, we are here live on LinkedIn, followed by a private interactive wisdom circle that you are invited to join. Because in that circle, we're going to unpack all of the wisdom that we're harvesting here and that's opening up in this conversation. And we do that on the Leader Path, which is Powerhouse's community of practice for whole conscious leaders, bridging Western leadership practices with Indigenous ways of knowing and being. The Leader Path is a leadership gym, and it's designed to accelerate your resilience, to restore your well-being, and amplify your impact as you practice decolonized leadership and learning what it means to you to be a good ancestor and make decisions through a 7-generational lens. This sounds like your thing, so you can sign up for a 30-day free trial at powerhouse.com. This is a live conversation, so if you're just joining us, please introduce yourself to us in the chat and let us know where you're connecting in from and what's present for you from this conversation or just in this moment in history that we're co-creating. Okay, let's get back to our conversation with Margie from Thought Architects, which you can find out more about her at thoughtarchitects.ca. Okay, back to this unknowing, the vulnerability of saying, I don't know. And I'm going to toss to Charlene. I can see her mic's on. She's ready to go.
Well, just before we move into the next section or the next layer deeper of the conversation, I want to encourage us to blow it up so that we can pull it back in even more specific. Because we dove into healthcare as a system that needs rebuilding. And I would say that any of our major systems across Turtle Island would not have gotten through what the healthcare system just got through half as well as it did. The financial system, the judicial system, the political system. So I want to make it clear that we are in no way picking on the healthcare system. I'm actually wanting to blow it up and go, we are in the place of healing right now. I happen to know that in business and entrepreneurship, we are actually in a tough time right now because government supports that happened through COVID are no longer happening. So the system of business and how we work and how we are supporting founders and entrepreneurs and folks growing their business is in an interesting spot right now. So my question is, and we can zero back into healthcare, or we can talk about what are the practices that we need to be paying attention to right now during this time of healing the system that are actually going to help us put trust within a system that currently is in a rebuilding state, right? Because when I go to the hospital, I still need to have trust in that system. When I go to my bank, I still need to have trust. And that's the reality that we're living in right now. That's the conversation I want to dig into. What is the practice that we can talk about as leaders to take a step forward and still have trust in the system that we know full well needs to be rebuilt, and that we're in that space?
It's really society you're highlighting. It's like it's permeates everywhere, and different systems are just a reflection of what's going on everywhere. I think there's a precipitous, it is a rebuild, and we're on this like thin line. And I don't think it's that hard. In some ways, it's hard. It is hard. It's difficult. It's complex. It's challenging. But I think there are elements that are very easy. And this is, it sounds so crazy, but it's like, how do you listen to people? Do you listen to find connections with them? I mean, nothing wrong with that, because that's, a normal chit chat way of doing. Like, how do you both have dogs, you both live in the same place, you both travel different same places. Nothing wrong with that. Do you listen to be able to respond? And that's how a lot of people listen. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you're a litigator in court and you're defending your client, you better be listening to respond. Like, it's really important, but it's not necessarily a way to actually learn and connect. Are you listening to fix? And again, not ill-intentioned. Many of us don't like to see others struggle, and you really want to help, so you listen to fix. But I mean, how many times have you gotten advice that wasn't helpful and wasn't really what you wanted? I really think it's about, how do we listen to others? And listen doesn't mean you have to agree. It doesn't mean you have to say, yeah, that's right. Listening just means, how do you see the world? What does this mean to you? And listening for both emotions and content. So it's, what are people saying and why are they saying it? And it sounds like such an easy concept. We know it's hard. I mean, I teach coaching skills, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about coaching skills. Whenever I teach people, they're like, oh my God, I cannot begin to tell you how things just changed as soon as I started listening differently. And it's raising that intention. I think it's a starting place. It's a stillness. It doesn't mean we have to do anything with it. We just need to listen to understand. And we're so busy trying to do, and so busy trying to fix, and so busy trying to get our own point across, that sometimes we just don't listen. And it happens, and it happens in those little microsystems. Like, it can start with you. I saw Jane Goodall last night. She was amazing. Okay, and I texted myself all these quotes that she had, because they were just so good. One thing she said was, I don't know what to do, but I had to do something. And it doesn't mean that you have to go and fix the world, but you can listen differently. It's a complete healing space. The other thing she had is, only when our head and heart work together do we ever achieve our potential. And so how do we link? When you listen for both emotions and content, you're able to pull that head and heart together. You're feeling this way because of something. You always feel something because of something else. And if you can impact somebody else's thinking, that actually sets them on their own journey of self-directedness and being able to say, okay, I now have clarity on what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it, and this is what I want to do with it. And that's about honoring somebody else's ability to make their own decisions. My decisions are not the right decisions for other people. And I think that's, what else did she say? I think she had a whole bunch of stuff. Oh, and this was it. Yes. Let them take the credit for their own change in behavior. Let them be self-directed. We all need to feel self-directed. It's a psychological nutrient we have. So give that gift to somebody. So that's where, I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not rocket science, but it's not easy.
To me, that what letting people be self-directed, that is one of the byproducts of, the fact that we don't do that, but think we do that, is what colonized leadership is, which is the paradigm we've been in.
Yeah.
Decolonizing leadership is actually this is whole leadership. The whole person makes a decision, and they're like, wait, I made that decision. Nobody told me what to do. there. I thank you for opening that up.
Where this takes me is the value of loose frameworks and principles, where, you know, we have the 7 grandfather teachings. We have the principles and the stories that have been passed down for generations. We don't need to tell people what to do. We need to provide them with guideposts, a loose framework where they can feel self-directed. The leader path in Powerhouse is a gym. It's a space. It's an infrastructure. I'm all about self-directed. I'm probably too hands off. I've been reprimanded for that. But I'm here to see you at your highest potential and provide a loose framework and dangle the tools that you have the choice to use when you're ready to use them. And that's the epitome, but that comes from generations of stories. Like, that's not anything new, but we have to be ready to use them. I don't know if that takes you anywhere, Sharon, but that's where my mind went when I heard, you know, self-directed.
Yeah, it'll come back to me, but close, but that's not what the thought that I had. I'll bring it back. Thanks.
So I want to just dive in for a second, because, you know, you started talking, Margie, about just the art of listening and holding space for somebody. And I want to actually dive a little deeper into that, because what is the role of wonder and curiosity in your work? Like, just that, like, pure curiosity. And how do we cultivate that into our own lives, and then into our leadership practices?
I think there's a nuance around curiosity. And there's a little bit of a test you can do for yourself. Are you curious for yourself? Is there something you want to learn? And do you approach it in that way? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's how we learn and grow. Like, we should. When you are, and I often think of this as, you know, I use the term coaching and I use it loosely. I think it's, you know, we have a practice of coaching and there's all these things and it's certified. We make it all technical, but it really is about being present for somebody. So when you're curious in that mindset of wearing a coaching hat, it's about a curiosity to help the other person be curious about how they see the world and unlocking different thoughts they have. So if you're curious for someone else, for them to explore their thinking, versus are you curious for your own learning? So I think there's a time and place for each. Like, neither of them are wrong. There's different ways of being in different situations. And I think that adaptivity is that adaptive stance is really important. But when somebody feels stuck and is unsure, helping them explore their own thinking is really actually it's psychologically powerful. Like, and going back to, like, what do we know from the medical world and medical frameworks? We know that there's like 3 psychological nutrients we have. We have to feel connected to others. We have to feel self-directed, and we have to feel good at things. And we can be in an environment that makes that flourish, or we can be in an environment that actually thwarts that. And it's funny because I think, you know, more Tina and I talk, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, all these things that we've figured out, put all this Western language around, are actually the Indigenous ways of knowing and being. But it's different language and different contexts. And they come from somewhat different places. But I think the way to put these concepts like curiosity, like holding space for others, is to recognize that there's these things that we're now discovering in Western culture have always been there. It is that those past teachings that we've lost, we have to reconnect with. I'm Jewish by background, or Jewish by choice. And there's a lot of Jewish teachings that, as you listen to them, and that there is that storytelling. It's that ongoing connection to stories. And I think I told Tina, I think I told you about this. I don't go to synagogue often, but I did go one Rosh Hashanah. And I still remember this rabbi talking about the fact that living in the moment is not actually a very strong Jewish teaching, because it neglects all the generations that went into making you in this moment. And it forgets that you are a part of that fabric that goes forward and creates new generations and new moments for other people. And so when you are living, you actually have to, it's your duty to consider what brought you to that moment and what are you contributing to the future. And that you're part of this fabric of humanity. And that's like stuck with me for a long time. I think it's one of the most beautiful moments because I just imagine us all interconnected. And I think those are the things we have to remember. Those are those loose frameworks. We are all interconnected.
I just want to pause for a moment and repeat something that Margie said that I think is really key, and just and have it land for those who are listening. And that is that we use this language sometimes, and we tend to romanticize the idea of whole leadership, but it comes back to the fact that it is simple and not easy. And because it's so simple, it is easy to overlook. And yet consciousness and raising your level of consciousness is water. You can't live long without it. And so I just want to remind everyone some of those practices that we've talked about: paying attention, listening, having semi-permeable boundaries, and doing simple things like just resting and nourishing ourselves. Those are very simple concepts, so simple that they're easy to overlook. And yet that is exactly that grounded knowing that is so necessary for leaders. Let's not complicate it or romanticize it, but let's acknowledge that it's actually still, it takes diligent discipline to engage in. And I want to add one more thing before I toss it back to Margie, and that is, we talk about the words, we often use the word practice. And one of the words that I don't know, I guess Echo introduced me to, that has always landed for me, is the word ceremony, right? That in practice, in ceremony, we prepare ourselves for that level of consciousness, for that whole leadership, and that it is an ongoing ceremony. And I see Shar as unmiked as well, so I'm sure you want to add some things into there.
Yeah, I think I'd love to dig into a bit of a conversation about creating the experiences, because where Christina's remarks kind of come at me is we're trying our best to heal systems within the confines of the English language. So English is not our first language. And so in work that we do with leaders, primarily in coaching, in workshops, we sit and we share language. Even that, as a practice of walking towards whole leadership, has restriction to it, which is partly why I'm so drawn to media. Because if I can get into the sensories beyond the words, if we can create events like the fire circles where we can evoke feelings through sound, music, drums, singing, Echo talks about ceremony. And so again, I just want to kind of blow our minds a bit. And I'm just going to put it out there and say, we are not going to heal the systems of our society purely by talking it out. There's a role for conversation, but through the English language, we are in fact restricting and confining our ability to heal.
Damn, you just blew my mind. So you mentioned other media. I'm going to flip it. I want to pick your brain a bit. Sure. You mentioned other media. What, and using different forms, music, sound, language. What are some of the things you've experienced that have had the strongest healing impact for groups?
Yeah, I'll give you two examples. We recently had a change maker say to us in our work through Powerhouse, I don't know what it was about you, but I could feel the drumbeat of your organization. And I was like, yep, it's working. I had an experience with a group of phenomenal filmmakers in Idaho last summer, which I've told the Powerhouse Braid here about, where we literally sat in a tree house by a river and we did not speak a word for well over an hour. And this was a group of 8 or 9 women, not a word. And it was not needed. And energetically, I can't even explain the experience, but I'm just saying that I can only speak through my own experience, but my most powerful healing right now is actually beyond words and conversations, and which makes it interesting to be hosting a conversation. But I do not want to restrict us into the confines of colonial ways of working and being.
Wow. Wow. Reminds me of a story one of my mentors actually tells. And it was with a friend of his who was Japanese Canadian, and his grandfather was, born in Japan, still had his best friend in Japan. And the best friend also lived with them, and then they moved. So they were both in Alberta, and then they moved. And, these two used to go for coffee. These two elderly Japanese individuals would go for coffee every day. And, no one knew what was going on. They just connected. They knew they were friends. So when they moved, they actually set them up on FaceTime. It's like, okay, here we go. And so they sat there and they were like, and every once in a while you'd hear, Another one say, And that went on for like half an hour. And they got off, and the son goes, you guys were supposed to have a visit. And the grandfather turned to me and said, we did. And then he just left. And it was that mere presence, even through the screen. It was the same way they had coffee for years, but nobody knew that's how they had coffee. They were just present with each other. And I think we forget that silence is a productive part of the conversation. Like, that's something we teach in our leadership programs and in coaching. Silence is okay. Silence is productive. Silence is reflective. Silence is letting you get in touch with where you're at, and also thinking about where the other person's at. And we think we have our own associations that we put with silence. And what you're teaching me right now is that we have our colonized views that we put with silence. And then there's a whole bunch of other associations with silence that we don't even know about. So thank you. Cool.
Yeah, society, mainstream society has us thinking that too much silence is a bad thing, or, like 1 hour. Oh my God, how did you survive that? 1 hour of silence. Whereas Indigenous ways of knowing and being, silence is a normal part of our existence. And it's actually very healthy for you. Our bodies need that. It just brings me back, like we talked about Echo before, and our friend Echo Alec. She's so wise for her young years. She talks about bringing her life, and I'm trying to do the same, like bringing ourselves back to a natural state of the seasons where, in the winter we're resting. We're not like the mainstream society has us living in this rat race where if we're not competing all the time, then we're not worthy. We have to be go all the time, and it's just not it's not a healthy way to live. And so I just wanted to Shar, you talked about the English language, and I that brought me back to one of the First Nations chiefs that I worked with for a few years. He was telling us stories, and then he, in his storytelling, he stopped and he said, "Well, there are stories that he can't tell us because there's no English words for what he wanted to say." And so that just had me thinking that, like there's so many stories out there that how can we bring them to life without the English language? Like how bring them to life in their language. There's that one movie that's from the Haida Gwai. It's all in their language. There's nothing in this. It's not English subtitled, and I don't think it is. It's just an amazing story, and media has a way of bringing these stories to life. That's what I'm trying to say.
This is Gather for Her, a co-created conversation with global leaders and change makers and social impactors. And we are live with change makers every 2 weeks here on LinkedIn. So please keep joining us. And as we move into our last 10 minutes, I want to invite us to just think about what we're amplifying in the world right now, because amplification on the inside as well as the outside is not easy. And here in Powerhouse, we talk about embodying 7 generational practices and being public in our way of being in the world. That's that amplification on the inside and outside. And just want to invite you to step into the world of Margie as a change maker leader out there who has amplified her internal world and is bringing that forward for all of us to be learning from. You're modeling whole leadership, Margie, in the work that you do with the leaders that you support, in the systems and structures that you are designed to work in. And where would you like to go next? I feel like I don't actually know enough about the thought architects, and I want to give a bit of space for that and your change work in the world.
So, I think, and actually I wanted to kind of bring it back down to, what do you do? Like, how do you make this something that is tangible? Like, we talked about some pretty big ideas, and how do you make it tangible for people? And I think what we do is we take that stance of not knowing, to be honest, and we call it facilitation. Facilitation is about not knowing. So when you work with a group, you are not the expert in that group. You are the expert in process. You're the expert in helping people think through things. You're the expert in people exploring. And people learn best when they explore and have a sense of discovery. Remember when you're a kid and you figured something out and you were so excited? That doesn't go away. So how do you harness that in teams? So it's not about coming in with, here's what you need to know. It's a little bit of, here's what you need to know. Now, how are you going to put this to practice in your life? So here's some coaching skills. So for example, we take coaching skills, and you can do this whole training and become a coach, and you can get your certification. And that's just not what most people have time, space, or really inclination always to do. Instead, how do we take these nuances of communication, using words, because it is the context most people are in, sure, I think you've, again, blown my mind when it comes to this whole other areas, but using words, using language, using silence, as a different way of being with people to help them improve where they go. So really tangible example, working with physicians. We teach them coaching skills, and we teach them to listen differently. You're not listening to fix, you're not listening to diagnose. Now, physicians are very much taught, this is how you diagnose. And there's a brain pattern that goes with that, a process of elimination. What are the zebras? What are the things that you could be missing? What's the most likely scenario? So there's a whole pattern that occurs. Then you actually, instead, how do you listen in a different way? So you can say, this is best medical practice. Now switch into coach mode. As you think about your life, how does that fit for you? So how does somebody take what they've just learned from a physician, integrate it into themselves, and put it into a context that makes sense for them? And so we teach them the skills of coaching. How do you ask questions in a way that is inviting, not judging? How do you use silence and let people actually reflect and create space for them to answer? Because how many times do you go in and the doctor talks at you and then you leave and you're like, I didn't even get my stuff out. So how do you use silence? How do you slow down just a touch? And that's a big fear that people have. If I slow down, I won't get through my day. And it's shocking. A great coaching conversation can be a 10-minute appointment. It's no different than your typical average family doctor appointment. You can use coaching skills in that time. And it doesn't mean you drop the medical component. It's just you add in this other component. So we teach them how to use that, and we teach them the skills, but then it's up to them to sort out, how do you fit this in your life? Are you using it with patients? Are you using it with students? Are you using it with your spouse, with your kids, with your team? And so we create the opportunity and we hold the space for them to try on these skills in different scenarios and figure out what makes sense for them so they can get that learning experience. It is that experience of discovery, that delight. Because when it works, you're like, oh, I talked to a physician who just took our coaching course, and she said, I had no idea that learning how to listen and taking one course, like 2 hours once a week for 9 weeks, would have this much impact on my patients. I have reached a whole new level of therapeutic alliance with them. I'm shocked. And she says, and I'm not even good at questions. It's just how I listen and how I'm paraphrasing back what they say. That's it. So again, it's not complex, but it's hard. The other things we do is we teach leadership programs, and it's the same thing. It's about how do you take this knowledge and put it into context for yourself? And we actually, again, hold space for people through coaching conversations in between topical areas so that it allows for people to have that integrative time. There's some really great research out of education that shows that if you want people to make change, if you just tell them about it, the chance of being able to make change is like 5%. If you demonstrate to them, it's about 10%. If you actually allow them to try it out, like simulation, it goes up to about 20%. But if you coach them on their thinking about that change, the ability of them to implement it goes up to 80% because it becomes theirs. It is about people take content in, it goes through their filter, and then it comes out as something else. So you have to allow that space for people to do that. And we don't, because we are, as you were mentioning, go, 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 go. So I don't know if that explains what we do.
Yeah.
But that's what we do.
Becomes theirs. I love that. We're just coming up to our hour. So I want to if we can just take a moment of just a breath. Because I feel like this could go a lot of places, and yet our time is still completing. We're in a container, a structure, a system, and both are present and welcome here. And let's do a round of what we're leaving with from Margie. And we'll give you the last word, Margie, as we close Gather for Her. I'll go first. I'm leaving with hope. I'm leaving with hope that there is someone, you and Thought Architects, and what Powerhouse brings, opening up these intangible conversations where there are yearnings to learn, and that I have hope because this is possible and it's happening right now. That's what I'm leaving with. Thank you for the work you do, Margie. Who's next?
I'll jump in. Yeah, thank you for that, Margie. I'm leaving with gratitude. And what you said about if you want people to make change, coach them on their thinking. And so I really, that hit me very, and I work with Indigenous women. And so I'm going to, I think I do that to a small degree, but I think I'm going to rethink that to implement that more and to listen and allow integration. So thank you. Huge, huge learning for me.
Yeah, I'd like to tag on to Sharon's comments and just say I'm taking away loose frameworks to allow self-directed healing through integration, where we listen lots, we drop a few words, and then we hold space for integration.
I'm actually taking at this moment, I'm quite humbled because I'm reminded of my propensity, my default to tell rather than to than to truly listen. And so I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so grateful for how you model servant leadership, and like in such a fierce, compassionate, and dedicated way. Like I said, you walk that I'm a better person because I know you, and I'm humbled by this conversation. So thank you, Margie.
You guys have this ability to embarrass people. I think something I'm actually taking away a curiosity, because as I think about this construct of having conversations and using coaching, what other modalities might be available in that kind of similar coaching construct? So here's the coaching box, but we use words in it. So if I were to layer something around it, what would be another way to achieve that? And I'm really curious as to what that could be. So I'm leaving with a real curiosity.
Thank you, Margie. And thank you for joining us on Gather for Her, a co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors. This conversation has been recorded and it's going to be shared on our YouTube channel. So you can listen to us again, or just come on back to LinkedIn and press play and listen to us there. It's also moves over to a podcast renamed as How for Her, which you can find on Spotify and all the other places that you listen. Gather for Her is hosted by Powerhouse, where we walk beside leaders to amplify their change work and integrate Indigenous ways of knowing and being on their path to whole leadership. Many, many thanks to you, Shar, our impact media producer and sister company, Regen Media, who reminds us that we can take the power of media into our own hands when we support stories that heal, regenerate, uplift, and transform. Thank you to the hands at our back, Powerhouse and Regen's digital storytellers, Zoe Gray, Madeline Archibald, and Willow Smith. And thank you to my co-hosts. That's you, the brave sisters of change, from Powerhouse, Charlene, Christina, Sharon, and of course me. And to you, our listeners, our community of change makers, leaders, and social impactors. Thank you for walking with us in co-creation of the world we're living into together. Reconciliation in action begins with awareness, followed by a practice or ceremony, and then is carried forward within us as integrated knowing. You are always welcome here each week on Gather for Her, and there's always a place for you at our fire in Powerhouse. So much love to everyone, and we will see you all next week. And deep bow to you, Margie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody. This was amazing. Thank you.